Jihvā-vegam, pranams to all. So I'm here today to shamelessly promote this book, śiṣyāt, or Nectar of Instruction, as it's also known. It's translated as by Srila Rupa Goswami. And it's very important to don't be intimidated by the size. It's actually only 11 verses. And this edition includes about half a dozen different commentaries, which I confess I haven't been through myself in full. One very precious thing it does include are the commentaries of our grandfather Guru, Padam Guru Dev Srila Sridhar Maharaj Dev Goswami. So I tend to kind of cheat and just jump to those parts. But again, it is literally just 11 verses. It's very short, so you can just, reference those verses and their translations. It's so important for those who are practitioners on the path of pure devotion, the line of Shuddha Bhakti, and specifically in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who appointed Rupa Goswami, the author of this book, as the leader of his lineage. Rupanuga Sampradaya is how we are often known. And it covers everything. In 11 short verses, this text covers everything from the most basic level of evolution to the highest. So I'd like to go through. I'm actually setting a challenge for myself and anyone who'd like to join me. I'm here at our London temple right now, in West London, the outskirts of Heathrow Airport, outside of central London. I'm here for like two weeks, two and a half, almost 3 weeks. And I'm setting myself a challenge that while I'm here, to go through these 11 verses and 11 videos. A little friend here. I don't know if you saw the charming, mysterious-looking white cat. Looks like Alice in Wonderland character. Don't know where she came from. So in 11 videos, I want to go through these 11 verses. And this book was actually, this edition was printed here. It's a really beautiful edition. I'm also promoting this book because they made a lot of copies. Beautiful illustrations made by our own family members. So it was printed by the community here. So I also feel especially inspired to support the distribution of this edition. Okay, so without further ado, I don't want to make these too long. I want to make these digestible. Let's go to the first verse of Upadeshamrita, which is discussing basic human urges that we all struggle with. And it may be a little off-putting for some, because in this verse there's an emphasis on the negative side, while whereas normally in the culture of bhakti, of devotion, we're emphasizing the positive side, right? But in order to establish the pure nature of bhakti, we need to know what it is not also. And we also need to know how to recognize, where we are, right? So, because sometimes we may get into these delusions that we're at a very high level of evolution. But if we look within ourselves and see, oh, well, I'm still struggling with these things, then we can understand that we still have a long way to go. And it's not that we need to sit and cry about that. It's just about, we're students. And when you're a student, to progress, you need to know where you are. In order to get there, you need to know that you're here. If you want to make real progress, not just imaginary. We don't want to be like children putting on ballerina outfits or astronaut outfits and imagining that we're flying high in the realm that we're dreaming of. But we want to really get there in a real way. And so we're not afraid to confront these things within ourselves and to recognize what they are and to know without fear that these are just symptoms of the material energy playing over us. They're just like dirt that we've picked up and we just need to take a bath. That's all it is. Okay. So the first verse, vāco-vegam. So this is describing the 6 urges that every conditioned soul, every soul under the influence of the material energy faces. So, vāco-vegam, manasaḥ krodha-vegaṁ, vāco-vegam, manasaḥ krodha-vegam, jihvā-vegam, udaropastha-vegam, etān vegān yo viṣaheta dhīraḥ, sarvām apīmāṁ pṛthivīṁ śiṣyāt. So 6 urges. Vāco-vegaṁ means the urge to speak. That uncontrollable urge that we all have to say what happens to be on our mind at any random moment. Whatever whimsical or whimsical thing that may be. However relevant or appropriate it may be. And it's interesting because it's just kind of like this urge that comes up in us, and it's not always appropriate for the circumstances. And so it is, even just on a practical level, it's something that in, civilized society we have to try and keep under control. Sometimes we have the urge just randomly to say something for the sake of saying it. Sometimes it may also be motivated by something a little lower, like our ego, the sense of wanting to establish ourselves. And it can almost be kind of a joke sometimes, right? Like there's a particular point of discussion, and then there's something semi-related, which is about ourselves, and we get the urge to share it. But really, it's about just demonstrating our own greatness, right? Maybe I don't know if we need to analyze it all, but analyze all of these things right now in too much detail. Sometimes, it's a sense of envy, which is also related to that first point I just made. Many things, and it can get us in trouble, and it's also just something that kind of like reaffirms, enforces our mundane embodied condition. We all have a particular set of tendencies that we've acquired in our roaming throughout the material atmosphere, if we let these urges just run wild, then we're reinforcing them. They're perpetuating themselves and perpetuating our mundane existence. But if we like the next time we notice the urge rise up to say something, we should take a pause. This verse is helping us to take that pause. Mindfulness. People talk about mindfulness, right? To sit back and say, wait, is this really appropriate? Why am I saying this now? Is this actually pertinent to the discussion at hand? Is this contributing to the discussion at hand? Is this supporting my spiritual growth or the growth of others? Or am I just saying it for the sake of saying it? Am I saying it because I want to diminish someone else? Am I saying it because I want to make myself look like more? Where is it actually coming from? What is the purpose behind it? So we can take a pause when we see that this rush to say something comes up within us. Let's take a breath, take a moment. And when you start to do that, one interesting thing I've noticed is that you start to appreciate persons who are living in a more mindful and conscious way. I don't have the urge to speak under control. And it's really sad in our conversations, how there's often this need to, it's almost kind of like expected, like you have to say something 2 or 3 times, right? It's like you don't get heard unless you do that. It's a very sad thing. Whereas in more refined groups, in discussions amongst more refined persons, they'll say something once, and if you heard it, you heard it. If you didn't hear it, you didn't hear it. This is a more sophisticated, refined, elevated way of engaging in discourse. That you say something, you say what you mean at the appropriate moment with purpose once. That's it. And those who are attentive, they're hearing that and appreciating that, absorbing. And we experience that with our Guru Dev. He would say something and let it rest. And because he only spoke with such purpose, such intention, when he spoke, everyone was all ears. Whereas when there's this kind of like very loose conversation and loose way of speaking, we don't pay as much attention to each other. Because we recognize that in ourselves and others, that a lot of the time we just say random, meaningless things without any real purpose at the wrong time, in the wrong place, to the wrong people, right? So then we stop listening to each other. We stop paying attention to each other. this wonderful exchange, of conversation, this wonderful activity of conversing with others, it becomes kind of a little meaningless, So let's make our conversations, make our discussions more meaningful, more relevant, more intention, and we'll have more profound exchanges. So I better not go on too long. I'm going to keep this video somewhat short. So vāco-vegaṁ, the urge to speak, then manasaḥ, the urge of the mind, which will prompt us to say random things, to do random things in any given time, place, circumstance. Sudden urge, sudden thought will come, create this impulse, and we'll rush out to do or to say something or another. Then krodha, the urge of anger, that like reacting tendency, that something's not going our way, our desire has been interrupted, our plans are interrupted, our ego has been affronted, whatever it may be, and we react in anger, and we cause chaos, we create havoc in our environment. So, and then the fourth one, jihvā-vegam, means the urge of the tongue to taste. And one thing I appreciate in this verse is that there's a distinction made between the urge of the tongue and the urge of the belly. These are two separate things. There's you sometimes you see persons there, they may be very, very thin, they look like very self-controlled, but their palate, their taste is not controlled, and they're tasting many, many things, but in very, very tiny portions. So these are two. And then the urge to fill the stomach, that's a different one. Just the urge to, I struggle with that. We want the belly to be full. But even, just from a health, medical health perspective, like it's better leave some space in the stomach, leave some space for digestion. Better for digestion, better for health. It actually takes the brain 10 minutes to register that you're full also. So sometimes we think we're still hungry, we need to eat, but it's just the brain hasn't quite caught up yet. So the urge of the tongue to taste, the urge of the belly, to be full, and then also the urge of the genitals is the last one mentioned here. And this is a very strong, powerful urge pervading this atmosphere. Srila Sridhar Maharaj discusses it here in his commentary. It wasn't written, it was collected from his talks, and he describes it as this powerful universal force pervading the mundane atmosphere, and that we must try our best to remain aloof from this powerful energy. It's a funny energy. It comes and goes, and sometimes we just have to be strong and hold it out, because it comes and the next moment it'll be gone. These urges, it's another interesting thing. These urges, they're fickle, and we notice that if we just let them be, don't respond, don't act upon them, they leave us, even sometimes within a few moments. We experience in our mind sometimes all these whimsical, random desires pop up, and the next moment, they've gone. You see this with children, right? Children are very much under the influence of their mind. They tend to be uncontrolled minds, and you see how fickle the mind is. One moment they want to do this, another moment they want to do something completely different. And it may be 10 things at the same time. I want to watch a movie, I want a lollipop, I want chocolate, I want mommy, I want daddy. It's just these things popping up, but they don't last long. So it's important that we try to become, sit back, become these observers, witnesses, and see how things are playing out. They're not us, they're distinct from us. And wait for them to pass, because they will pass, sometimes very quickly. And sometimes these things just pop up because we're in a particular environment. This is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. What is the line? Sangat sanjayate kam. That desire arises according to our association. So that we may notice that when we're in a particular environment, something's right in front of us, the desire arises for it. But as soon as we're out of that environment, that particular thing or person or place, then the desire goes. So it's all very fickle, all these things. So we have to learn sometime, just wait for that wave to pass. It will pass. Be patient. Dhīraḥ, this sobriety. It's also described as translated as it's related to the idea of tolerance also. It's dhīraḥ. So a sober person who can tolerate these urges, it states here, sarvām apīmāṁ pṛthivīṁ śiṣyāt. They are qualified to make disciples all over the world. They are qualified to be the guru of the whole world, which in a general sense means that we are in a good place to make real progress. That will help to get us to a high level, a substantial level. And also the indication is there, it's a very difficult thing. Not an easy thing. How many people do we know like that, who have all these things under control? I knew one person like that, my Guru Dev. And others to different degrees, of course, but 100% not under free from the influence of these urges, it is a very rare thing. So I don't want to go on too long, but just to round things up here, tie things up. Going back to our first point, that we do want to remember that this, what's being described here, this is not something that's emphasized in the culture of bhakti. In the culture of bhakti, it's the positive side. What are we doing progressively for our Krishna consciousness? What mood of service, worship, love, devotion? What are we doing in that sphere? That's where the emphasis is. What are we doing in the sphere of giving, in the sphere of dedication? What offering of Harinam, the chanting of the holy names and service to the saints, the Lord, all these things. What are we doing in that sphere? That's where the emphasis is. So we don't get too hung up on these things, but at the same time, we don't ignore the issue. It's helpful to be aware and as far as possible to exercise some spirit of self-restraint. And we will be the gainer. I will close with reading the standard translation. The urge of speech, the urges of the mind and anger, the urge of the tongue, the urges of the belly and the genitals. A perseverant person who can control all these urges can instruct the entire world. Okay, thank you for tuning in. Please join me for this exciting new journey on śiṣyāt.